Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Sunday Matinee. I'm your host, Ben Stahl. This is episode 36. We're going to be talking about a little show that technically is a 2021 show, but, let's be real here. This is the way we kicked off our new year, watching Boba Fett. So, got a little bit to talk about for that, but first, got to introduce the panel. Joining me again, hasn't been too long, actually, since we did the Spider-Man spoiler cast. Kyle Sinclair. Kyle, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be here.
And just before that, we had the Lord of the Rings anniversary special. And coming back from that show is Miles McGillivray. Miles, good to have you. Talk about Star Wars.
Good to be here, Ben. Looking forward to it.
And with any luck, we will have a fourth panelist for this show. From way, way back, longtime viewers will remember him from the video game sequels versus movie sequels and remakes episode. Zacks for the first time in, almost a year. So we should be seeing Zacks soon, but we'll get things started here with some news. In first bit of news that's very much related to what we'll be talking about, Disney announced the May 25th premiere of the Obi-Wan miniseries on Disney Plus. Showed off a cool poster with him on Tatooine. Who's excited for Obi-Wan?
Kenobi!
Me.
I mean,
more of Ewan is good.
I'm excited for Ewan to come back. I'm actually excited for Hayden Christensen to come back. I think those two are both overdue for a script that will serve their characters much better and give them a little bit more to do. So that should be something good to look forward to.
Will you be happy or upset if they have a duel in this? I'm torn myself. Like, can they fight based on the New Hope, in which they say it's been a long time?
I always thought it was like that they were just going to go like visions with it, because he's out in the desert. He's going to go through some stuff. And I thought that he would have his own like Dagobah cave experience and encounter Hayden and like try to reason with him and try to redeem him like vicariously. That was kind of my thought, but they probably will actually have a physical encounter.
They could also, now that Last Jedi has set a precedent, do a sort of force projection duel as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he can't really give away that he's on Tatooine, because that does kind of ruin the whole premise of A New Hope. So either he's going off planet, which I wouldn't object to, or it's going to be, some strange sort of vision type thing. So but should be good. I'm really excited. Deborah Chow, who directed a handful of episodes of the first season of The Mandalorian, is the showrunner here, and I thought she was one of the best directors for that first season, so I'm really excited for this. Also, it's good to have Star Wars in the hands of a woman for once.
Yeah.
All right, so in other sort of revival news, guess what's coming back again, everybody? Futurama. The show they keep canceling and keep reviving is getting a 20-episode revival on Hulu in 2023. Now, when I wrote this out in the itinerary, there was just tons of excitement. But ever since, news has broke that negotiations between Hulu and Bender voice actor John DiMaggio have fallen through at this point, and he is currently not set to return to the show, which has sparked plenty of controversy because, I mean, it's Futurama. You can't really do Futurama without DiMaggio as Bender. So on the one hand, I'm excited. On the other hand, Hulu, whoever's in charge here, get your act together. We do need everyone to come back, because that's, it'd be like if Nancy Cartwright wasn't playing Bart on The Simpsons.
Or like if they did the Animaniacs and only got the 3 actors and like nobody else and had a completely empty cast. Hypothetically, if they were to do that.
I don't follow Animaniacs, but I'm guessing there's a I'm guessing there's some shade going on with that.
No. I mean,
No.
3 actors is all you need for a show like that. That ensemble cast, who cares?
Yeah. So here, fingers crossed, because I'd like to see the entire cast come back, because that's a special show.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, in the news, and again, Miles, we've had so much Lord of the Rings news pop up since we did that episode, and it's infuriating. This would have been perfect. The Lord of the Rings and Hobbit film and game rights are up for sale, currently valued at $2 billion, according to the rights holders, which is the Saul Zaentz company. Warner Brothers still has limited film rights as of this moment, because they are developing an animated film, The Lord of the Rings: War of the Rohirrim, which I didn't even know about until this. But it's heavily speculated at this point that Amazon is going to be the one to come in and scoop up those rights, considering that they are currently developing the Lord of the Rings television series. Anyone have any thoughts on that? Because
I don't know much about rights, and I didn't know about this until you posted it. But my very first thought within the first 5 seconds was Amazon. They're going to do it. They're going to get it. Like, they clearly love it.
Yeah, in the age of this isn't really necessarily film news, but this has become sort of the age of major acquisitions, with Microsoft spending exorbitant amounts of money to scoop up big game studios and Sony following suit. And at this point, $2 billion for a big corporation is tragically chump change. So,
man,
wouldn't be surprised if it was. Maybe that's why Prime prices are going up, is because they need to make that Tolkien money. All right, so that's it for the news. So, moving on to what have we been watching this week? Just for kicks, hidden gems, watching something new. I finally jumped into the Harley Quinn animated series on HBO Max. It is absolutely in the same vein as other adult-themed shows like The Venture Brothers and Archer. So if those are your cup of tea, Harley Quinn is definitely the show to be watching. It's a blast, and unlike The Venture Brothers when they originally aired, there's no filter, so you get all the swears. It's wonderful. I've also been the other night, I introduced a friend to Nightmare Alley, and we had a great time watching that. It was my 4th favorite film of 2021, but it's an insanely intense film, so we had to decompress. So we watched Free Guy right after that, and I think that's a good decompression movie after you watch something as intense as Del Toro. And finally, just on a whim today, because last night, Rogue One writer Gary Whitta tweeted that he thought the Bond theme, For Your Eyes Only, is an underrated Bond theme. Well, that got me thinking I should just watch that movie. So that's what I did today, just on a whim, because Gary Whitta said so. So those are my sort of recommendations for the week. Again, Nightmare Alley, one of my favorite films of last year. Free Guy, probably the funniest film I saw last year. And honestly, For Your Eyes Only, probably Roger Moore's best Bond film, in my opinion. Miles, you been watching anything this week, apart from, obviously, Boba Fett?
Yeah. The Righteous Gemstones on HBO. We've been watching that. John Goodman, Danny McBride. It is a terrible, terrible show. As in, they're terrible people. Not that the show is bad. It's super. In that one, you need to take a shower after that. It's about these big mega churches, super rich. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but I highly recommend. And it's now going through its 2nd season. And one of the middle episodes of the 2nd season just changed everything. So it's a big deal. So it's pretty good.
Zach has arrived.
Dun. Zach, welcome to the show. It's good to have you back.
Hello, everyone.
So, Zach, we've already gone through the news. We're on What Are We Watching? So I'm going to jump to Kyle really quick, so I'll let you compose yourself. Kyle, have you been watching anything exciting this week? Anything revisiting old gems?
Yeah, it's been Boba Fett and finally Ted Lasso and the first couple episodes of Murderville on Netflix. This is the one where Will Arnett plays a seasoned detective, and every episode he has a different celebrity partner who wasn't given a script, and so they have to improvise their way through the case. And at the end, the celebrity guest has to like guess who the killer was, and it's pretty brilliant. It's an excellent conceit. I wish I could be a celebrity to be on that show.
Yeah, that's actually that's what I was talking about last week on the show with Gary. I blazed through the entire. It's a short season. You can easily get through it in a week. Mm-hmm. So yeah, highly recommended. Just absolutely delightful. Who was your favorite guest?
I only saw the first couple, but of those, it was Conan.
Conan is a good one. Okay, Zach, have you been watching anything great this week that is not Boba Fett?
I mean, don't just say that I was watching something great and then say Boba Fett before you hear my opinion of it, sir. But our go-to like chill and watch show before we go to bed is West Wing. So we're in the middle of season 3 of West Wing for our 9th time, which has been good. Otherwise, we've watched the first 2 episodes of Murderville, just like Kyle and you, Ben. Really enjoyed that, both Conan and Marshawn Lynch. I like Conan better just because he is a trained comedian, so he has the timing a lot better, and I think he and Will Arnett just play really well against each other. And it actually has me really excited to see what Knives Out 2 is going to be like. So I'm that just kind of gets me in the detective-y mood. Other than that, the last movie we watched was Shang-Chi, which we both really enjoyed. So other than that, nothing crazy.
Well, that's what we've been watching this week. And before we get on with the main story, I wanted to add one more thing, and this is kind of a special one for Zach and myself. In 6 days on Apple TV, they're going to premiere a brand new show called Severance. Stars Adam Scott. He's going to be starring along with Patricia Arquette and Christopher Walken. Produced and directed by Ben Stiller. This show is very important for Zach and myself because we happen to know the series creator. We went to school with him. I was in a show that he wrote, and anyone who was at Western during that era who saw the trailer for Severance can immediately point to it and say, we see the DNA here. So we're really excited. It means I have to get Apple TV Plus sooner than I had wanted, but I'm all in on this show because Zach and I both know that this writer is like, we've been waiting for this for years. So
we even when we were in college, which was forever ago, we were just saying like, we can't wait for Dan's big break. So we're both really excited that does make me think of one more thing that I've been watching, because Kyle, you said Ted Lasso, which is obviously on Apple TV. Ben, you got to watch Ted Lasso because it's on Apple TV. But on Apple TV, as of several weeks ago, the official Fraggle Rock reboot, Fraggle Rock Back to the Rock, came out. And it has most of the original voice cast from the show from the 80s. And it feels as if it's just the 5th season of the show. And it's seriously amazing. Great music, great messages, super thought-provoking for a children's show. It's excellent.
That's actually kind of appropriate, considering that at some point during this show we will be talking about a Muppet. All right, so it is time to move on to our main story for this episode. And before, again, I keep pushing it, but we are recording before the Super Bowl, so we are no doubt missing out on a ton of newsworthy topics and trailers that will come up. So, it happens. This was our best availability for this show, so I'm sure we'll have a lot to talk about next week about what the heck drops during the Super Bowl,
Jurassic
good
Park,
or bad.
Jurassic World, Sonic the Hedgehog 2,
Aaron Donald.
Boy. There's going to be something, but it's time to talk about Boba Fett. All right, so Boba Fett. This is our first real Star Wars centric episode. A year ago, we did an episode that was about toxic fandom, and Star Wars was sort of the litmus test for it, because Star Wars fans are easily among the most vocal fandoms, whether it be for good or more often than not for evil. So just want to put this out there. Everyone's going to have a different opinion about Boba Fett. You're going to get on Twitter and you're going to see some people say it's the greatest thing ever. Some people are going to think it's the worst thing ever. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. Don't knock someone down. Whatever you think about the show, don't knock someone down just because they think it's different. And it's Star Wars. I mean, for the first time in years, Star Wars is growing. And that means that we're going to get good Star Wars, and we're going to get okay Star Wars, and we're going to get bad Star Wars. For several years, we just had the trilogy, and everyone was pretty much on the same page that this is good. But now that there's more, it's going to change. It's going to be different. So, just live with that, everyone.
Yeah.
So,
well said.
Boba Fett. Here's a character that has been elevated to a sort of mythic status among Star Wars fans, despite the fact that in the original films, he probably has no more than 15 minutes of screen time.
I think he has
Very
6.5 minutes.
You would know that. 6.5 minutes of screen time, very little dialogue, and is mostly, his big accomplishments are he was the only one smart enough to track Han Solo, and then in the next film, he was the only one stupid enough to get knocked into a Sarlacc pit by a bumbling Han Solo who is half blind. So I want to ask, what do we know, what does this panel know about Boba Fett outside of those films? Because he has appeared in several different mediums, which unfortunately are no longer canon. So, Zach, I'm going to go to you last because I know you've probably got a ton of knowledge. Kyle, did you ever read any of the comics, any of the games, books that Boba Fett appeared in? Did that sort of shape any expectations for this show?
Oh yeah, he was a favorite of mine as a kid. I had several action figures, and including a model of the slave one. I thought he looked cool, and he had a jetpack, and that's all you needed to be cool in the 90s. Outside the movies, he was a very tough boss in the Shadows of the Empire game. I read the Bounty Hunter Wars trilogy by K.W. Jeter, but other than that, I was not really exposed to him. In canon, he also appeared a few times in the Clone Wars as Daniel Logan version, where he found himself at odds with the other bounty hunters in his crew, including Cad Bane. I think I was basing my expectations for the show on the end credits scene of Mandalorian, when we saw Fett march into Jabba's palace and just ruthlessly murder Dib Fortuna. I didn't think that he needed a show, but he was pretty badass in Mando, and I figured they must have a good story they wanted to tell.
All right, yeah. Miles, did you read any of the books, video games, any of that stuff with Boba Fett?
None of the EU stuff, though I did watch all the Clone Wars, and he's also in a couple of the newer Vader comics, along with Black Chrysanthemum. They play a pretty pivotal role in those, so I enjoyed those. Mostly just Boba Fett, the mystery of Boba Fett within the trilogy, the original trilogy, is what brought, I feel like, a lot of people to the show. I mean, he's kind of an enigma. Like, Darth Vader has to rein in Boba Fett. Like, no disintegrations. Boba Fett's going to shoot. Vader pulls him down. Who is this guy who backsasses to Vader, who's like, he's worth a lot to me, and Vader's like, we'll compensate you if he dies. Like, who is this guy? So that's where I came from in the end credit scene as well. I mean, he just walks in and shoots him. So that's the expectation that I felt before the show.
Okay, Zach, I know you've seen all of the Clone Wars and pretty much everything that, Star Wars. So what set your expectations for this show?
Definitely the Star Wars Holiday Special, to kind of set us on the right foot in terms of Boba Fett's real introduction and the the whatever his weapon, his sword / gun thing that he uses in the thing that he rides, which we see him do in this show. I read a ton of Boba Fett comics and things that he was in the past. The same trilogy that Kyle talked about as well. He was in a DLC for Force Unleashed, the original Force Unleashed, which was really cool. Also, he plays such a huge, in Clone Wars, the animated show. I think I love seeing like a young Boba, because we get to see him very minimally in Attack of the Clones. And obviously we kind of have like the memed / somewhat important now moment of Boba holding the disembodied head of his dad, of Jango Fett, and I think that now, in the moment of seeing Attack of the Clones and being like, okay, this is really ham-handed, but now I think like we kind of see Boba grow up. Like we have like kind of like more of his history in terms of, early on in the show, Book of Boba Fett, we see his development with the Tusken Raiders. And I think like just having the introduction of him as this naive character in Attack of the Clones, who is a clone of his father, and knowing Jango Fett's history as this guy who every clone, every stormtrooper up for a long time is based on his dad's DNA, really kind of gives the viewer, no matter what, if you've seen all this stuff or if you have a knowledge of, Jango Fett and Boba Fett's history, I think it really lends like a really sinister feel to how Boba would interact with the Empire. I mean, how weird would it be to be like rebelling or like not wanting to interact with these troopers because they're your dad? You know what I mean? I think like there is a lot of rich history and rich things that are still quote in canon for Boba Fett, that it makes him an interesting character, even though it doesn't, like none of the things that we've seen as a mass audience, either through streaming services or in theater releases, anything that really like gives as much like quote badass character development as any of the stuff that's extended universe now. Yeah, Boba Fett's awesome. The character is awesome.
Well, that is definitely true. Boba Fett is awesome. I, unfortunately, am probably the least knowledgeable of everyone here. I sort of dipped my toes into the Clone Wars and enjoyed it, but, it was just, I didn't get to watch it as it aired on the Cartoon Network. I started watching on Netflix. And, when you're binging something that's that massive, sometimes you get interrupted and you just can't go back. So I'm missing out on a lot of the lore of the bounty hunters, of Cad Bane, of young Boba Fett. Most of what I know comes from the films. And from Shadows of the Empire is really the only book and game I ever experienced that had Boba Fett. I never read any of the bounty hunter trilogies. I never even got to read Tales of the Bounty Hunters. So I'm missing out on a lot of expanded universe lore. But I do think for the mass audience, we hit the nail on the head, is that we love Boba Fett because he's so mysterious, because he's an enigma, because he, even though he does so little, he introduced us to that Mandalorian armor, and it is one of the coolest designs in all of Star Wars to this day. So it's no surprise that he did get a show. It's kind of a surprise that it took them this long to really start to dive into his character post Jedi, because we've all known for years, even though it was never canon, we've all known that he somehow got out. He had to have. He's too cool to be stuck in the Rancor pit for 1,000 years, slowly digesting.
Sarlacc pit.
Thank you. But let's talk about the actual series. I just want to get quick gut reactions to the series as a whole. Miles, I want to start with you on this one. Just what worked, what didn't work, what did you feel?
Yeah. Well, what worked for me is the Boba Fett's journey with the Tusken Raiders. from captive to dancing around the fire and that cool scene and becoming one of them. All of that worked for me. We also then went away from that, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it in the what didn't work section, but also there's a lot of setup. Cad Bane, his appearance worked for me. I was kind of nervous because I knew he was coming and I was wondering how he would look in live action. That worked for me. And my third thing I wrote down is just the inherent, I didn't expect to get from Book of Boba Fett, is the inherent conflict between the Mandalorian creed and the Jedi way. I did not know we would be getting that from this show, but we see Din be removed from the creed, and we see Yoda not choose the Jedi path, and them come back together. All of that was the heart of the soul. Clan Mudhorn got some interesting stuff coming up.
Kyle, what were your just gut reactions to seeing this show?
All right, strap in. This show, this was the sequels in TV show form. It's like 3 different people trying to tell 3 different stories without a clear plan to link them together. You've got the Tusken flashback, Fett trying to garner the respect of Mos Espa, and then 2 whole episodes of The Mandalorian in the Book of Boba Fett. And then you get a finale with a brand new villain with basically no build-up, a plot twist about who actually killed the Tuskens with no payoff or any narrative purpose, and Grogu, of course, has 0 impact on Boba's story. I don't know why he's there. On top of all that, Boba Fett is kind of a bumbling, inept clown throughout the entire series. Every time he tries to make a decision, another character disagrees and he just kind of goes along with it. He needs help in every fight. He almost gets Slave One eaten by the Sarlacc. He gets constantly disrespected and trash talked to his face. And he just stands there and takes it. And he promises protection to one business and it gets blown up. Blown to bits. And he makes this weak deal with the crime families and then gets surprised when he's betrayed by them. This show was actively bad. It looked and felt like a fan film with slow action, distractingly amateur character design, nonsensical character decisions, and writing poor enough that I was keenly aware that I was just watching actors on a soundstage. To clarify, this was 2 shows. One was a roughly 5-episode miniseries about Fett on Tatooine, and the other was an interlude of The Mandalorian, season 2.5. Those sections work, but it was baffling that they would progress Din's story so far in a spin-off show. The actual Boba Fett episodes were entirely devoid of content. During the climax of the final episode, my wife and I are both openly saying, I'm so bored. 40 minutes of these guys fighting these blown up droidekas. There's no excuse for this level of inept storytelling, especially after the disaster of the sequel trilogy. And I've heard people say, to wrap it up, that people just don't like it. Fans don't like it because they projected onto Fett for years. They've just projected and they're disappointed about what they got. But I think that this is as lazy as saying that critics of The Last Jedi just hate women. What do we actually know about Fett? He's a bounty hunter. He's the son/clone of Jango, the template for the entire Grand Army of the Republic. And he's so ruthless that Darth Vader knows him by reputation. We also learned in Mando that he's stoic, loyal, and a badass fighter. So what exactly are we projecting here? The end.
But did you like the Rancor?
No!
Oh.
And I'm watching this dramatic build up, the fingers as he comes up, and it's like, this is a really freaking cool moment. They even had King Kong Rancor, but there was no build up to it. In episode 3 or whatever, he says, teach me to ride it. And it's like, okay, so that's going to happen in the finale. We never saw it again, and it just happened off screen. What is the point of that? Cut the Mando part out, put that in season 3, make that 2 episodes longer, and show Boba Fett actually like learning something. He was like, those 2 droids are going to destroy the entire city. And then the Rancor destroys the entire city. Who wrote
They
this?
only had like 12 people to guard the city anyway, so.
Zach, what is your gut take on the show?
I think in Boba Fett, in Bad Batch, and in Mandalorian season 1, and in Clone Wars season 1, and in there's no downtime in Rebels. Rebels just hits right off the bat. But I think something that I really have tried to accept with Star Wars, but with media in general, especially with this oversaturation of like streaming services and like new shows and like, oh, it's like the expanded universe of everything, not just Star Wars, but of everything. Like there's always like a different side of it. I mean, like look at all the Marvel shows, there's just everything, right? Like I think there is a room and a space for things that aren't 10 out of 10. I think there is a room and a space for things that are 7 out of 10 that we can still find like little nuggets of things to enjoy. And before we started Boba Fett, my wife and I like rewatched Mando season 2, obviously because we get that Boba Fett reintroduced in Mandalorian season 2. And going into Boba Fett, I didn't necessarily have like the highest expectations because I think like the sequel trilogy taught me to not have super high expectations. So then, even then, when I don't have any expectations, I can still be more let down than by anything else in my entire life with Rise of Skywalker. But I just think that if we were to take overall like Boba Fett, what is the average like score of the season of Boba Fett? It's so hard because like as Mandalorian episodes, it's like the 5th episode directed by Bryce Dallas Howard kills it. I mean, for someone who is vocally to a fault defending of the prequel trilogy, like it is like episode 5 had everything I could ever want in a new Star Wars. Anything. Like I would have come out of a movie theater seeing a 50-minute episode of a TV show and been like, my $27 for that ticket was totally worth it. Like the 5th episode of Book of Boba Fett is worth a Disney Plus subscription just to be able to watch that one episode. However, you have to trudge through the first 4 episodes of Boba Fett, which even if like the story of the Tusken Raiders is cool, I think that we're still trudging through so much Star Wars content that just doesn't have any weight. I think that's what really bugs me about Boba Fett overall, is that there's really not any weight to things that happen in the show. I mean, just look at the final moment of the entire season when we see Cobb Vanth like in a tube with the dude who can modify people, right? Like the stinger is that, and it's like even that, like we just saw that he got shot and killed. I didn't even have a moment to really mourn for a character I didn't care that much about, to be honest. But I mean, like, and now he's back to life. Of course he is. It's so similar to Rise of Skywalker when Rey zaps and destroys Chewbacca's ship, only to 2 minutes later realize, oh, Chewbacca's alive. Or, oh no, we have to erase C-3PO's memory. And then actually, I have this failsafe. His memory is totally fine. I think so much of Boba Fett falls in line with that for me, where it tries to pull all this emotional weight for things. And then the payoff is 40 minutes of like people standing out in the open and being surprised when they get shot. Like there's no weight to the fact that Boba Fett is a badass bounty hunter, and Fennec Shand, introduced in Mandalorian, is supposed to be this incredible sniper. What was she doing the entire time? She never used a sniper rifle. She's just like, yeah, whatever. And we have the Power Rangers driving around on their things that look more out of place than anything in the existence of Star Wars. Are those like 4 bright colored motorcycles. Like it was so hard, I think, to come from episodes 5 and 6 and feel like, yeah. And the finale certainly had some cool moments. I mean, like, even if the Rancor was so much Superman and Man of Steel and trying to be like, no, I'm saving the city, when actually destroying it more than the villain was. There were cool moments in it, but overall it's like this was an hour episode in which I loved maybe 6 minutes of it. And that's how I felt about the whole season. Like this was 7 episodes of a show in which I really loved 1.5 episodes of it. That's me.
All right. What didn't work, everybody? No, I do think that there is a huge letdown as far as the show as a piece, as a piece of 7 episodes. But that is Star Wars. You know, if we're gonna defend the prequels and we're gonna defend the sequels, the cool things stick with you and everything else does melt away. I think my problem watching the show was the sense of scale. We've got, I mean, as far as we see, it is Boba, Fennec, and 2 green pigs in an empty room. What, not only getting aside what I think we're going to talk about soon, which is why does Boba even want this? Why does anyone care in the city? Why do they, once they get out of the Tusken plotline, why does he think the people of Mos Espa are his people? Certainly that town has no love for the Tusken Raiders. So there's certainly no connection there.
I also thought about Jabba the Hutt there. Were these people when Jabba the Hutt ruled this? Were they like, "What's up, Jabba? It's so good to see you." Like, no one cares. It's just this creepy dude on a hill. Like, let him be creepy and have his rancor, you know?
Yeah, he says he's the daimyo up there, but we will let him do that. And sounds like he's getting a food supply somehow. Yeah, that part.
They got the frogs outside and they're like that.
It would have been more compelling to have Boba Fett question his own, what am I doing here? What do I learn about family? How do I do that? We could have done the same thing with just a simple twist.
Yeah, I definitely lean a lot towards what Kyle and Zach had to say, because what we started with at the end of The Mandalorian was, yeah, he comes in, he kills Bib Fortuna, and assumes the throne. And I imagined that what we were going to get out of this was going to be something like The Godfather. Like, he is going, and I'm kind of jumping to another question here, but exactly what does he want? He doesn't want to be a crime lord. What he really seems to want to be is the sheriff. He's really shooting for lawful good in this show, which is a massive departure. And I get that he can, I get that his experience with the Tuskens may have changed his ways, but why pick Tatooine? Why assume the mantle of what was traditionally a crime lord, and go to your fellow crime lords and say, I'm honoring what you do, but we have to make it legal. It just didn't work. And yeah. And I'm with you on the whole, like, yeah, it really pivoted in episode 5 for reasons we'll get to in a minute. But let's literally look at this show by the numbers, because it's really telling to see what critics and audiences thought of this show when you look just at what they had to say on IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes. Chapter 1, Stranger in a Strange Land, directed by Robert Rodriguez. And these numbers are as of February 10th. I doubt they've changed that much in 2 days.
Mm-hmm.
IMDb user score for the first episode, 7.4. Rotten Tomatoes, 82%. So, as Zach said, there's room in Star Wars for 7 out of 10. It's fair that okay stuff exists. And this show literally started out okay. The problem is you jump to, well, actually, I think episode 2 is kind of in line with what IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes says. IMDb 8.2, Rotten Tomatoes 90 for The Tribe of Tatooine, directed by Steph Green. I felt like it was a step up.
Mm-hmm.
We got
some episode.
We got some
That's
better
a lot
action.
more Tusken Raider stuff.
Some good Tusken Raider stuff. The train heist is a really cool action sequence. And the problem is, after episode 2, it never escalates. Chapter 3, The Streets of Mos Espa, where we're introduced to our gang of street thugs on their KitchenAid bikes.
Can we parallel this for a moment and just... I really need to hammer home here. This is really important to me. I'm serious. I will watch anything Star Wars. I will watch anything that is Star Wars, and I have watched everything that is Star Wars. And for the longest time, the sister characters that are in Clone Wars, they get introduced in season 6, and then there are 4 episodes of them in the middle of season 7 of Clone Wars. For the longest time, I'd always think those are the most annoying characters in Star Wars, and I could do forever without having to see them again. Like, I was always so fearful, like, oh God, they're going to introduce him in live action. I'm going to have to deal with them. I don't have to worry about that anymore, because this biker gang kids that like have like tattoos, but also like cool modifications that do like, I don't know, Jet Li spin moves in the final episode for their gunshots and ride these bikes around. Like, anything that has to do with them, I automatically feel disconnected to, because they clearly visually are so disconnected from the rest of Star Wars. Like, they just do not fit. And like, as like, I think some people even felt that way back in the day with like Jar Jar. It's like, oh, he's a fully CG guy. He's pretty goofy, whatever. Problems with Jar Jar aside, like, they didn't try to put all of this emotional payoff with him, and they didn't try to like rope him into every single dramatic scene that the main character has. And anytime that Boba Fett and Fennec Shand have to interact with these dopey kids on their bikes, I rolled my eyes and I looked over at my wife thinking, like, they really still trying to like make this work? And having pretty much a whole episode focus on them was just like a slap in the face. Like, just cut this episode. Why is it even here?
They are
Agreed,
so bad. Oh, good.
But counterpoint, I don't know that I would call them the most annoying characters, because they aren't even characters. They're like just millennials that are trying to be hip. They don't look like they're dressed for a desert planet. They, if they were like, they stand out. They stand out in a bad way. Every time they're on screen, they look like they're from a different movie, but I don't know that they're annoying per se.
Could this have been cool? The idea of, no, I don't think it was, but the idea of like the board group modifying themselves mechanically for fun and becoming this gang that sort of terrorizes things, like a bunch of General Grievuses or something. This could have been cool. It was just so wildly and poorly executed. The colors of their bikes alone, is disqualified.
It would fit on Coruscant. It would fit on Coruscant, but not
it could have fit on Coruscant. It could have fit on a much more industrial planet. But on a planet that we see, like, from the very first moments of the very first Star Wars movie in New Hope, like, we see this desolate desert, like the creatures that are like running the show we see are like the Jawas and Jabba the Hutt. And it's not like Jabba has like all these fancy tech all over the place. He's got a bunch of doofus pigs guarding his palace.
Yeah.
Gamorrean lives matter.
What did the eye do? What did the arm do? Like, at one point he looks up across the street and zooms in and goes, it's them. They're there.
It's his bad guy detector.
Yeah. If Boba Fett had an army of mechanically enhanced like people who had been beat down because they didn't have any work and stuff like that, there is something there on paper, and I feel like that explains why they're in the episodes so much. And then somebody allowed that execution. Somebody
by the name of Robert Rodriguez.
He does not get a good rap based on his credits here. 1, 3, and 7.
Episode 3 here, The Streets of Mos Espa, 6.4 on IMDb, 59% on Rotten Tomatoes. The first episode to sort of dip into
rotten territory,
lower levels, rotten territory specifically on that. Chapter 4, The Gathering Storm, directed by Kevin. I can't pronounce his last name. I'm a bad
Tancherone. I think it's Tancherone.
I'm going to go with that. 7.6 on IMDb, 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. There was hope for this episode. There were moments, but there was no payoff ultimately. I think what really got everyone most excited about this episode was literally the last 5 seconds when we hear those words, "We need muscle," And as soon as that happens, we hear the Mandalorian theme, and
Mhm.
we know what's coming next. Because Chapter 5, The Return of the Mandalorian, directed by Bryce Dallas Howard. 9.4 on IMDb, 100% on Rotten Tomatoes. This episode just pivoted in a way that I don't think anyone expected. And I honestly thought at the end of this episode, like, there's going to be a stinger in this episode, and it's just going to be a title card that says The Mandalorian Season 3 coming December 2022. And it didn't. But that's what I wanted at the end of this episode.
Yeah.
Because that's
because you were more excited to wait like 10 months for the third season of an old show versus next week's episode of this current show.
Yeah. It absolutely. And at this point, we are kind of venturing into just about every question on this itinerary. But this episode literally just stops the narrative in its tracks and tells a completely new story. And in one episode, it tells a better story than the previous 4.
Still a better love story than Twilight.
We're
Kelly and the Jawas.
We're reintroduced into a character that we have been invested in at this point, and exploring lore that was introduced at the end of season 2 of The Mandalorian that we've been excited for. And we just want to be there right now. We want to be back with the Mandalorian and Grogu. That's it. I mean, and chapter 6, I think is a flawed episode, but the numbers still say IMDb 9.5, Rotten Tomatoes 89, because I think chapter 6 is flawed, but the stuff they got really right. Continuing that story with the Mandalorian.
I think it's interesting to parallel the Rotten Tomatoes score for chapter 6, which was mostly a Mandalorian episode at 89% on Rotten Tomatoes, with chapter 2, The Tribes of Tatooine, which we already talked about, but Rotten Tomatoes at a 90%. Like, I would, just talking to friends and seeing online people that are talking about Boba Fett right now, I would have thought that 5 and 6 would be highest rated everywhere. 5 being the pinnacle of the show, I think, but 6 shortly after. I want to, before we move on to 7, because I think 7, we're going to have a lot of stuff to say about the finale. I think 6 has some stuff that's worth digesting, including what I think is, I don't know, something that I think people have very strong opinions about and have for the longest time, which is like CG recreations of characters we've seen before. Because we saw that, the one that I think of most vividly, I guess, is in Rogue One, where we see both Tarkin and Leia as young versions of themselves in CG. And I think that overall, like, if you were to watch Rogue One and be ready for that and know it's going to be a CG Leia, it's still like, it's such a short thing that you don't really get the chance to be like, is that a real person or did a computer make that image? Whereas with Luke, and I even felt this way at the end of Mandalorian season 2, where I feel like the creators of this technology, be it in Benjamin Button or most recently in Boba Fett, like this CG face over a person's body, I just feel like I don't buy it as much as the people that are making it think the audience would buy it. Because I feel like at this point, I would just so prefer if they just cast a real person as Luke instead of trying to computer generate him, because I just think that a computer generated face, no matter what, is just not going to be consistent throughout the emotions of a character. And especially for how much we see Luke in this episode, I think it really takes away from what is actually some really meaningful interactions between Luke and a Padawan and Grogu. And I also think it introduces concepts that we don't really get payoff to until, dare I say it, The Last Jedi, in terms of Luke really questioning what it means to be a Jedi. because I think there might be this through line between Grogu's decision to go with the gift that Din gave, the chainmail, right? Versus the lightsaber. And I think there is going to be this through line between Luke understanding that, okay, is it really supposed to be that we're going to be disconnected from people that we care that much about? Is that really what the Jedi Order is all about? And who knows, maybe in Ahsoka we get more of Luke understanding how betrayed Ahsoka felt by the Jedi Order in Clone Wars. I think there are a lot of interesting implications that are presented in episode 6 that I think are just wrapped in not my favorite wrapping. I think there are some ideas that I'm super excited to get payoff for in the future, either in shows or in films or in books or whatever. I love where they're leading with Grogu. I love where they're leading with Ahsoka. But a lot of it is just wrapped in this really cookie cutter, this is a CG face, or this is what you expect Luke to be at this point, which is you're either a Jedi or you're not, dude. I want a little more wiggle room and a little more humanity, I guess. But I think the episode is really great overall.
Well, that is Luke's core failure. I mean, we see the first piece of it in this episode, in episode 6, where we see that he is going to say you cannot be a Jedi with attachment. And he talks about his arrogance in The Last Jedi to Rey, and he realizes his failure from Force Ghost Yoda. This is the beginning of it. So I agree with the through line that is probably coming. And I like that idea. And it does make sense, despite what a lot of people say, it does make sense that Luke would forsake attachment, because although he learns the wrong lesson, it's a tragedy of it. Attachment saves him, but you can see why he would not see it that way. He leaves Dagobah. Yoda and Force Ghost Obi-Wan beg him not to. Don't go save your friends. They literally say, let Han and Leia die if you honor what they fight for. They tell him that. He goes to Dagobah and it does not go well. So you can see how he looks back on that thinking, my attachment almost got everybody killed. And then he learns from Ahsoka, presumably, which is a huge deal that they even know each other, that the Jedi knew that they shouldn't train Anakin. In the prequels, they all knew, the whole council was like, we should not do this. He is too attached. And they think that that's the mistake that they made. And so Luke is replaying that here with Grogu and forcing Grogu to choose in a horrifying way, by the way. I know he's 50, but do we have to do this now and in this way? But I can see why Luke would think this way. He learns the wrong lesson and he fails and he needs to learn from it. And we are what they grow beyond.
There's a lot to unpack in that episode. But I do since we touched on, do want to talk about the problem of bringing Mark Hamill back the way that they did. Also because Mark Hamill is credited for his performance in the episode, and Mark Hamill didn't actually do anything. It was another actor.
Isn't it his voice?
It's his voice, but it wasn't. He didn't record anything. It was a synthesizer. They took samples of dialogue from the original trilogy.
Voice.
Yep, and created that voice, which is kind of why he sounds a little bit robotic in the episode, is because it wasn't Mark Hamill's natural voice. It's upsetting to me because a lot of people immediately went on Twitter and joked oh, Disney should re-release Solo with young Harrison Ford because they can do it now. It's do we really want to live in a world where all Star Wars is going to be from here on out is young Luke, Leia, and Han telling filler stories in between the original and the sequel trilogies. It was really cool to see Luke come back at the end of The Mandalorian. It's a cool way to sort of tie it all into the greater lore of what we know of Star Wars. But there's a whole galaxy out there to explore, and that's what I want these series to start doing with The Mandalorian and potentially future installments of Boba Fett. Yes, Ahsoka is ultimately going to tie back to stuff in the prequels and the Clone Wars. There's no way to avoid that, but introducing new characters like The Mandalorian should allow us to start exploring all new stories like we got to do in the expanded universe with stuff like Tales of the Bounty Hunters, Tales from Jabba's Palace. There's all sorts of side characters who have interesting stories to tell if we just stop having to tie it all back to the Skywalkers.
Well, did we need to do this? Because we got Luke out of the way, and now for every episode of Mandalorian, as Grogu gets stronger, we don't wonder, like, where is Luke in all this? So maybe that's a silver lining.
And maybe Luke's ultimate failure is that he didn't even put a car seat in the X-Wing. I mean,
cool.
like, I get, like, I trust R2, I guess, as well. But, like, you didn't even, like, fly back with Grogu to make sure he found the dude you were going to find. Like, you were just like, you got it. You'll be fine. Like, he's somewhere else. Just go find him, dude. I thought that was so weird that Luke sent Grogu off without just coming with. Like, what are you doing right now, Luke? Like, that was your one Padawan. Like, you got some reading to catch up on here, Luke? Come on. Gotta find all those
he didn't read those texts.
Yeah, it's very obvious that he did not catch up on any Jedi readings.
Slacker.
Oof. Shoot. We've jumped all over the map with just talking about these episode by episode. I think we've answered a pivotal question already. I think everyone here is going to agree that episode 5 is their favorite. Like, does anyone disagree on that one?
No.
It's the episode we didn't know we were getting and took us completely by surprise when we needed to, and unfortunately sort of sealed fate of Boba Fett in that we just they told the better story.
Yeah.
I want to go back to those first 4 episodes because there's something there in those first 4 episodes. And Kyle, you actually touched on this when we were talking in the Spider-Man episode when you talked about Boba Fett a little bit. I think it would have moved along. I agree with you with this. I think it would have moved along in a much better place if it wasn't, those first 4 episodes weren't split between the past and the present. Season 1 of this show could have just been Boba Fett recuperating from the Sarlacc pit with the Tusken Raiders, and they could have expanded on that because the Tusken Raiders are just a fascinating group that doesn't get touched on enough. All we know about them from the movies is that they're savages, they're animals, and we slaughter them like animals.
And they're fairly strategic. I mean, they had their numbers by walking in single file. Like I even when I was a kid, I was like, that is so smart. That is the coolest thing.
And the Kenobi book also features the Tuskens and reveals that they aren't a species, they're just a people. And so, like, you can get lost in the desert and become a Tusken. They, wrap you up, and it's kind of haunting.
I mean, this show could have done that. It could have introduced that choice for Boba Fett, like become a Tusken or abandon these people and go your own separate way. And unfortunately, the show didn't leave him a choice because, the Tuskens are killed off.
I imagine that's a really hard language to learn. Like, you're just some random dude wandering around the desert. And you're like, yeah, I guess I'll wear this mask and have this like pike thing, but like,
How interesting! It would have been so fascinating to parallel Din's fanaticism about his mask and the Tuskens refusing to take off their bandages.
There was a lot of cool mythical stuff that we could have explored as well with the sea and the dried up and all that stuff. I like the idea of having there be a whole season, Ben.
But instead we had to, again, what the concept of the show that just made the least sense to me was why assume the mantle of daimyo. It's the whole thing that didn't pay off. Yeah, this could have been an entire series about teaching the Tuskens to adapt to modern technology and learning from them, a give and take. But
now, what did the flashbacks inform? Like, I'm a Lost apologist. I watched Lost. I loved Lost. So I'm just saying, I throw that out here. But every flashback in Lost informs something that happens in the present and sheds it in a new light or reframes it. Like, what happening in the present is changed or even attached to what we're flashing back to?
I think we're supposed to be getting his humanity. Like, for some reason, that is why he wants to remove the crime, because criminals killed them. But I felt the same way about the Camino flashbacks. Like, why did we see him as a baby? He never grappled with his father's death or his place as like the last clone.
there's a lot of lore there and tragically, what we got out of the flashbacks was he has a gaffy stick so that he can kill Cad Bane at the end.
Yeah.
That's it. He doesn't even use that much of the Tusken training to take down his big foe. He literally just trips him with a gaffy stick and stabs him in the chest.
Justice for the warrior. Yeah, justice for the warrior princess, the Tusken princess. We need her back. We need more of her.
So we were just talking a little bit about how it would have been fascinating if this entire first season had been about Boba and the Tuskens, but that also conflicts with a question I have here. Will Star Wars ever leave Tatooine behind? Because
they might name it something different. They might name it Jakku.
That's a stupid name.
that backwater planet.
It's pretty much nowhere.
Well, here's the thing about Tatooine. If Luke Skywalker is Bruce Springsteen, Tatooine is New Jersey, and we are not born to stay in Tatooine. We are born to run from it. That is the whole purpose of Tatooine in the original movie. Is this where Luke wants to get away from, like being called adventure? So we don't need to come back to New Jersey anymore.
I think it may just be because it's easy to shoot. It's got the nostalgia factor and it's easy to shoot. We haven't seen a whole lot of complex civilizations like Coruscant or Naboo lately. Yeah. We just see a whole lot of dilapidated earthen huts. Same with the alien species, actually. They're all sort of like furry and ape-like now. But the variety and the excitement from the imaginative prequels has been completely missing, I think. Even Last Jedi's glitzy casino was bland. So I think it may just be like this is easy to shoot and it looks Star Wars.
I think something that has bothered me especially with Boba Fett, that bothers me about the continual, like, let's go to a desert planet, Tatooine, Jakku, whatever, is that there really hasn't been like much reason to be attached to the planet. Like, I think of when I was a kid and I saw Attack of the Clones, and it's like, oh my God, there's this whole planet that's on the ocean and they have all this floating stuff and all the cloning facilities are in the ocean. Like Camino is such a fascinating planet. Like there is character in some planets, like seeing Coruscant for the first time in this giant city that is expanded a lot in the books as well. But it's like, it's so fascinating to learn about that. And now it's like Tatooine is nothing. And even Boba Fett acknowledges that when we see that Jabba's palace, which in the original trilogy is like bustling with people, it's like there's nobody here except the people we paid to act in this for the next 3 minutes. I kept thinking of in Rebels, the planet of Lothal. Ezra, the main character in Rebels, his home planet Lothal is referred to constantly through that. All 4 seasons of that show revolve around that planet, really. But there is so much there. Like they really take the time to explore what it means to live on Lothal. You learn about the actual animals and how they affect everything about the planet. You learn about the history of the Jedi and the Sith on this planet. And there's so much there. And it's like, how can we not just take that amount of effort when you're spending millions and millions of dollars to shoot on this bland soundstage anyways? Like, can you invest more time in telling us why Tatooine is important versus just like being like, look, there's the screen is all around us, so it looks like the desert goes on forever. I don't know. Like I'm just so bored of it at this point. And even like exciting moments, like in the first episode of Boba Fett, where they're digging through the sand and that giant like 4-armed creature come out. It's just like, there's really nothing here, is there? There's really nothing about this planet that's worth staying here for.
Luke Skywalker describes Tatooine as the planet that is farthest from the bright center of the universe, and yet in Star Wars, Tatooine seems to be the center of the universe. Again, let's go back to Episode 5. It opens on something I don't think we've ever seen in live action Star Wars, a space station. Like what the and a space also. An obvious nod
the
to
Death
Halo.
Star is a space station.
Okay, fine. A space station that's inhabited by not, fascists.
That you
fascists.
couldn't confuse it for a moon.
But again, you can confuse it for the Halo rings. Like it was just from going from the sands of Tatooine to a space station was already felt like, how refreshing is this?
Something interesting, something new.
Yeah. And then to go from that to in Episode 6 to Luke's planet. It's like we're all Rey at that point. And it's like, I didn't know there was this much green in the galaxy. It's like, I didn't know there'd be this much green in this show.
Like I said, it's a great New Jersey.
Yeah. I really do. I just think if we keep telling Boba Fett's story, I have a feeling we're going to be stuck on Tatooine for part of it, but we've hit a point in his story where it's like he can make that decision now to leave, and I think it's time. It's time to leave. We're going to get Obi-Wan on Tatooine because circumstances unfortunately dictate it for at least part of that series. I hope that Obi-Wan gets to leave Tatooine and go off and do something. But we know we've got at least one more series that's going to be set on Tatooine. But Disney, Lucasfilm, if you're watching this right now, please.
Absolutely are.
Leave Tatooine. There's a whole galaxy out there. Make us tired of Hoth, I guess. I don't know.
Go to Hoth.
I don't think we really need to talk too much about Episode 7 right away. I kind of want to jump into Star Wars sort of veering into the sort of territory that Marvel's been veering into for a long time now. Star Wars is obviously a giant universe in and of itself, but it's starting to become a shared universe in which it's reliant on having its audience watch everything to get the best understanding of what is going on. I knew going into Episode 6 just enough about Cad Bane to say I recognize this character, but I didn't know enough for it to just blow my mind like it did with so many people out there. I loved, Kyle, what you talked about when we were talking about Spider-Man, the assumption of knowledge, and we're going to avoid too many spoilers because Zach hasn't seen Spider-Man yet, but how the writers on No Way Home treated the villains who returned and gave the audience enough explanation so that you didn't necessarily have to go back and see older movies to understand what was going on with these characters. And I feel like that was not explained to me well enough with aspects of Boba Fett and the Mandalorian, if I'm being perfectly honest, because barely know anything about
or
Bo-Katan.
the
But I think
Darksaber.
but I think they did a
Was
better job in Mandalorian of explaining what the Darksaber is and who Bo-Katan is and what her conflict is with Din Djarin. Whereas Cad Bane shows up, everyone's freaking out, and I'm just like, okay, it's not a bounty hunter. They could have brought back Bosk.
It could have been Rango.
Is there really anything like this pivot or like this in the MCU though? Like these huge plot points for the Mandalorian and for Grogu happen in this other show. Like, has the MCU done anything that drastic? Like, this is having like a major Iron Man moment happen in a Captain America movie.
Probably
Like
the
Civil War.
closest.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the closest I can think of where is now that Disney Plus has got their shows, like knowing what I know about the Disney Plus shows, it's like you'll want to have watched WandaVision and What If before seeing Doctor Strange, based on the trailers for Doctor Strange. Like, because the trailer for Doctor Strange, clearly everyone knows what Wanda's been through in her show. And if the audience doesn't know what Wanda's been through, they're losing out a little bit, unless they take the time in the movie to give us a little bit of her backstory. But
what's gonna happen in the future when someone's binging Mandalorian season 2? It recommends Book of Boba Fett for them. They watch the first episode and say, you know what, I don't really care about Boba Fett. They go to Mandalorian season 3 and it says previously on, and they're back. Like, that is unique even to the MCU, I would think. I'm trying to think of examples.
I think that's
what I was going to say. I think it's disrespectful of the audience to basically force them to watch this show if they weren't interested in the Book of Boba Fett. Force them to watch this just to get the information, because if they go from 2 to 3 and they're already reunited, it ruins all of that investment.
How do they know to do it? Is someone going to tell? Yeah. Is there going to be like a post somewhere on Disney Plus?
Or like, hey, if you finish season 2, cool, watch this episode.
Yeah,
they're gonna have to do what they do with Marvel is on. But if you go to like the Marvel subsection on Disney Plus, you can choose like, do you want to watch all the Captain American movies in order, or just here's all the movies in order. They're gonna have to start doing that with Star Wars. Here's all the movies with the shows interspersed.
Well, they've already order. They have like essential, like when Ahsoka came out in Mandalorian season 2, Disney had a thing that was like 10 essential Ahsoka episodes. So it had some Clone Wars episodes and some Rebels episodes. So I would imagine that they could do something like that. Like, oh, here's Grogu's plot line. You know, when Grogu's trilogy of movies starts coming out, it's like, oh, here's all of Mandalorian season 1. Here's like most of episodes of season 2. Here's the couple episodes of Boba Fett. Here's whatever, the few episodes of Ahsoka that he might be in, whatever. I think that what is bothersome about this trend of like this expectation of people to consume everything that you put out is that it kind of puts like tiers, tiers, of how much you're supposed to watch. Because like for me, like I think like, man, I'm excited. I read Doctor Strange when I was a kid. I'm excited to see the Doctor Strange movie, but it's like, do I really want to make sure that I watch this like pretty good show in WandaVision? And then on top of that, underneath that, it's like, oh, tier 3 is, oh, I should also actually probably watch some What If. Oh, actually, I need to read these comics to understand it. Oh, you need to read this blog post about it. It reminds me so much of the way that Star Wars is going, just like the MCU, where like things like the fact that the Emperor coming back in Rise of Skywalker was not in the movie Rise of Skywalker. It was in Fortnite. You had to go and play an event in Fortnite to hear the broadcast of the Emperor that was talked about at the beginning of the film that you pay to go see in the movie theater. And I think like that is the problem with so much of this oversaturation of popular culture, is that we're getting to this point where everything is a game as service, right? Everything is just, oh, I watched Book of Boba Fett, so I'm definitely going to watch every single thing that has Star Wars on it. I'm going to click buy on everything that says Star Wars on it, or I'm going to click buy on everything that's Marvel, or subscribe just to watch every Marvel show. And I think we're at this point now where it's like, if you expect that of me, I expect that it's going to be better than Boba Fett was, dude. Because like, if I'm required to watch Rise of Skywalker again to understand what the next movies are going to take place, like, woof. I've seen that movie twice in my life, and I don't know if I need to see it again.
We don't need to talk about it. Oh my God. I don't think the MCU has this problem as much as Star Wars does, though. The MCU has such a range of tones. Like, I guess maybe I'm just missing it, but I'm thinking about like my wife. My wife only cares about Baby Yoda, and she's not going to know where to go. She wants to see Baby Yoda use the Force to hug somebody, and that is what she wants. And how she know to go to the next thing? I think if you love Iron Man, you watch Iron Man 1, 2, and 3, and you watch the Avengers, and you might miss one or two things, but nothing major. I don't know that there's ever been something where they truly, what they set up at the end of season 2 happens in the Book of Boba Fett. It seems weird to me.
I agree.
I think Marvel has a much larger problem with that because they're all so disparate. If you're not interested in this one thing and you don't watch that, then you've missed out on a big part of the next Avengers movie. Whereas with Star Wars, it seems to be more linear. Things are coming out at a slightly slower pace for now. I think that what they're doing is kind of the same thing that Marvel is doing in that they're only assuming knowledge of the movies. I think that's where they should go to, because TV shows are a much harder ask. But for now, assuming knowledge of the at least 9 Skywalker Saga movies plus Rogue One and Solo, if that, I feel like that's a reasonable assumption of knowledge. Filoni has done a really good job with like the cameos and the way that Bane was introduced here. He was credited as Stranger in that episode. He wasn't even listed as by name. We don't have to know anything about him in order to think, whoa, this is a really cool, strange person who has marched out of the desert. It's unfortunate that like with no payoff, then he is murdered, but
Is he?
I think that they're handling this well. They're not assuming too much knowledge.
I agree, Kyle. I'm worried that it's going to start going in that direction that Marvel is, where if you miss one thing, you might end up missing a story beat that is going to end up being important. And between the 4 of us, we may not think that we've missed much in Marvel, but literally, like, without spoiling anything, like if you missed Hawkeye, you miss an important Zach, you and Kyle, like there's stuff that's happened in Hawkeye that is probably going to affect some stories going forward after some characters introduced.
Yeah, maybe.
And
I'm talking about Mandalorian season 3. Oh, sorry, Ben. I'm talking about Mandalorian season 3. You have to have watched Book of Boba Fett. Mm-hmm. We're talking about that. My wife watching Mandalorian season 3. She absolutely has to have watched Book of Boba Fett. That feels like more drastic than anything that I've seen in the MCU.
I feel like they're gonna have to come up with like when Mando season 3 comes out, like when you click on the icon on Disney and it's like first episode launching this time, they have like a thing that compiles like all of episode 5 of Boba Fett, most of episode 6, and the little bit of episode 7 into like an hour and 20 minutes of here's where Grogu and Din have been in the meantime.
I love that.
Kind of like how when Mass Effect 2 launched on PlayStation, but the first one was never available.
The comic.
They had to do that massive introduction because that audience may not have known what the story was going in.
And Din every time goes Paragon with that little cute Grogu, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. I agree, Miles, that I think that what they've done here with throwing Mando into the middle of Boba is probably harder to follow than what Marvel's doing, but that's also because Marvel is the meta right now. for better or worse, like Star Wars used to be the big thing. It's Marvel now. There's probably more Marvel fans in the world. Well, I can't say that, but Marvel, I think, has the bigger share of the discourse, and that's why we're all a little bit more caught up generally with Marvel than your average movie fan who's not going to know everything about Clone Wars, about the Bad Batch. And I promise one day I will catch up. I do, because what I did watch of Clone Wars, I did enjoy very much.
I think you got to watch it before Ahsoka, Ben. I think that's
you have to watch Clone Wars and Rebels before Ahsoka.
So I actually edited the Rebels movie, the TV show, each season into a movie. So I've got 4 Rebels movies if you want to catch up really quickly on
nice.
Nice. I'll probably just watch it all because I'm a junkie. I'm addicted once I go down the rabbit hole. My goodness, we've actually kind of covered just about everything. Do you want to go back? Were there any? And I think this is just some fairly obvious answers here. Were there any favorite characters in this series? Any that stood out?
Yeah, Cad Bane was definitely a favorite from the cartoons. Seeing Chrysanthemum in live action was awesome. I think it's cool to have a unique representation of the Wookiee species again. The Mod Gang stood out, like I said, but only because they were so out of place. They reminded me of an episode from the 80s Ninja Turtles series, where these teenagers from the future show up in New York and they're spouting phrases that the writers clearly thought were like super hip, but were already dated by the time I saw it. None of these kids look like they lived on an unforgiving desert planet. The Pikes also, they're a really cool looking species in the show, in the cartoons when they were introduced, but they should have been CGI'd here. I don't understand, because these were just humans with fish heads. It was a really strange decision, and they did the same thing in Solo, unrecognizable from their original counterparts. That's not even getting into the super obnoxious Major Domo, Stephen Root, Danny Trejo. Even Boba and Shan were so milquetoast that when I was reflecting on the characters, I forgot they were even in it. What I'm trying to say is, I think, the characters were so bad, and the only way they could make it interesting was by inserting the Mandalorian into the runtime.
I definitely like the Black Chrysanthemum as well. In fact, one of the cool scenes of I believe that was episode 4 is when he is going to rip the arms off the Trandoshan, and she convinces him, I'll pay your tab. You don't have to do this, and he does it anyway and pays. I mean, that was badass. The Major Domo was super annoying, but he was supposed to be super annoying, so I didn't mind it. And the twins,
not distractingly annoying. You can have annoying characters that aren't like, this guy's in makeup. It breaks the immersion.
And the twins were cool.
I felt like
I thought.
I felt like Jennifer Beals was wasted in this show.
Oh yeah.
To bring in an actress of that caliber and to have her do essentially nothing and then get blown up.
I hope she comes back in something prior.
I've lost your audio, Ben.
I can't hear you. Ben, you were quiet.
Yep, I think I lost connection there for a second.
Oh, there you go.
I'm back.
How do you feel? How do you feel about Jennifer Beals?
Talking about Jennifer Beals.
I don't know.
I can't pronounce the name of the Wookiee, but again, for a lot of people, that was like a mind-blowing introduction. For me, it was just like, it's a Wookiee. He was really cool, but I had no context.
He's an angry Wookiee.
Check out the Vader comics. They got Boba and Chrysanthemum.
Seeing that's actually a problem. Is not only do I have to watch other shows, I have to read comics, and that's nothing against reading. Reading is good, but
yeah. So I hadn't read those comics either. I just knew that he was a character, and that's one of the things they did here. They didn't assume knowledge of him. It was just like, whoa, this is an imposing figure stepping out. For those who knew him, like Cad Bane, it was like, whoa, that's so cool. But if you didn't, it's like, whoa, who is this? Let's find out.
Yeah. And I think all you needed to know was that he was imposing.
But the only reason that's frustrating to me is because, you log on to Twitter and people were just like, they're freaking out about it. It's like, should I be freaking out too? Like, if I knew what you knew, would I be freaking out? Would this be so cool to me? I don't know. And now I feel obliged to go back and do my due diligence and do my homework. Not just to have fun with it, but because now I need to know. So, yeah, what an
That's how they
interesting
get
show. Yeah. So, Book of Boba Fett, 7 episodes, a story sandwich in between that we are looking forward to, and one that just sort of ended. Do we think that we're going to get another season of this? And if not, do we think that Boba Fett is going to return and have stories and other shows?
I mean, I guess there's a difference between do I think there will be a second season and do I hope there will be a second season? Because do I hope there will be a second season? No. I have had my fill of Boba Fett. Like, if this is like the show that is named after him, that they are investing time, like, no shade on anybody, like whatever. Like, if this is the story that they want to tell about this character, I'm okay with it being done right now. Like, I don't really care if they're going to have more. And that's not a bad thing. Like, one-off seasons are fine. But do I think we will? I just think that for a company like Disney, all they need to see is that, like, the number one movie podcasts like this are talking about Boba Fett, and they're going to be like, oh shit, people are talking about Boba Fett. Let's do that again. It's so cheap to film on this stage. And Tamura Morrison is so old. It's not like he's getting hired for anything else. Come on back, dude. Let's film another season of the desert, bro. Like, I could totally see them having another season. And I would hope that, like, valid criticisms of some of the show would be, like, addressed. But in the long run, like, I think that all of these shows, Boba Fett, Mandalorian, Ahsoka, like, I think they're all just trying to end in, like, this, Infinity War style, like, giant thing, which on one hand, it's like, yeah, my God, is the payoff in Endgame when every character you've seen over the course of all of these movies, like, showing up and assembling, right? Like, oh my God, that's an incredible movie going experience, right? And I don't doubt that something like that could happen with Star Wars, with all of these characters. Like, just imagine, like, Din and Grogu and Ahsoka and, like, a younger Obi-Wan, like, all coming together and doing something amazing in a movie that, like, it exists. Like, there is a way to, like, have things like Boba Fett season 5 that universally, or at least semi-universally, I think, like, people can say, wow, there was a lot of stuff I enjoyed in that. And I think they have that ability. And if that is in season 2 of Boba Fett, if that is in season 3 or 4 of Mandalorian, or in season 1 of Ahsoka, or whatever, it's like, I want more things in this universe. And if it's Boba Fett season 2 and they do some cool stuff in it, I'm all for it. If they're going to go the same way they did with season 1, let's think of some new ideas, guys.
Yeah, at this point, I agree. I don't necessarily want another season of Boba Fett right now, just because where we left this one, it just doesn't pique my interest. They're going to have to let it simmer a bit and figure a new way to hook me in. Because by the end of season 1 of The Mandalorian, I was already ready for more. They had done a great job with keeping us hooked with a bunch of small villains, and then they brought in the big guns at the end. And I mean, honestly, like, when I was watching episode 7 of Boba Fett, I thought, this is very similar to the end of season 1 of The Mandalorian, only I'm not invested because we're not protecting Grogu. We're not protecting a character that we've latched onto. and we didn't introduce Moff Gideon. Like, we didn't introduce a compelling villain. They need to find a way to hook me again if they want to keep telling Boba Fett's story. Either do something different or introduce something new.
Well, I think they dropped what will be the compelling villain in season 2 when Ahsoka said, "Where is Grand Admiral Thrawn?" So I gotta think that's going to be the big Thanos type. Well, I mean, I don't know, but that's the compelling villain that I want.
Things,
I
like
would
all the
assume-
amazing things they could have done with a Boba Fett series, like you could probably come up with a better story. I also thought that he would serve as the godfather for a batch of like cool new bounty hunters that we could fawn over for another 3 decades. Like, he should have been dealing with the fact that he was aging and the fact that he was a clone, and like serve as the mentor for new characters that we could love instead of the lame ones that we ended up getting. They could have had him sent out to unravel an elaborate conspiracy across the galaxy. They could have actually committed to their crime lord shtick and had him, be a crime lord. But at no point did anything of consequence happen to him. He had no arc. He learned nothing, and he was the most boring character since Rose Tycho. Teacup. They have to do more. They have to. Yeah. He deserves more.
And I think so far the closest. Oh, go ahead, Miles.
I was just going to say, it seems like a foregone conclusion that he will play some part in the Mandalorian, the Ahsoka series is going forward. Like, he's definitely going to come back and do something. So, I mean, there's no way we're done with Boba Fett, if that's the question.
I think that we were so enthralled with Boba Fett for years, despite the fact, again, that he has so little screen time in the original trilogy. He appears briefly as a supporting character in Mando, and we love that. Boba Fett does stand as a great supporting character, one who isn't necessary to keep the story driven, but who shows up every now and then and does something really cool. I don't think it's impossible to bring Boba Fett back, in The Mandalorian or in something else. But for now, I don't think the focus of a Star Wars story should be on him, unless they come up with something. Kyle listed off a wonderful laundry list of potential storylines for Boba Fett, but go with something
Everything
that makes
we
the character
wanted.
interesting.
Everything we wanted from a Boba Fett series, we got in The Mandalorian. That's what it was. This Boba Fett seems to be the remnants of what was Solo 2.
Where is IG-88? Let's go. IG-88 versus Boba. Let's do
What was the IG in Mando season 1? IG
11.
11?
Yeah. Oh, who else was like secretly maybe hoping that like Amelia Clark would show up and be like running the Pike Syndicate? Have that
I
solo
thought that
connection.
it was either going to be her or Darth Maul running the Pike Syndicate.
There was no mention of Crimson Dawn. Like, that didn't seem to factor into it, since the Pikes were already trying to be strange and shadowy with the other crime families. Like, it did not seem like it was that big of a story.
Yeah, the Pikes would
be nice.
Tragically dull, and the Pikes, like, I don't know, they may as well have just been fighting battle droids, soulless.
Well, 68 of them died in the final battle. I tallied it up.
And how many of our side died?
I don't know. One
Like
farmer.
2. Yeah.
Not a lot, considering that they thought they were doomed.
And running down a straight corridor with a droid that can calculate where things are moving and like, what?
Why
Not one
doesn't the
casualty.
droid fire? Yeah.
Firing
The
at their
finale
feet
was a mess.
where they were 3 seconds ago.
Yeah, there's
It was poorly done.
continuity errors there. But
They left us up. Go ahead.
Oh, all of the continuity errors were so bad that it took me out of it. And they could have had many continuity errors and gotten to the Rancor, and I would have been super happy. I loved all the Rancor stuff. I loved him ripping apart those droids, and I loved him going wild. But it was the finale. We didn't really talk about the finale, but that they killed like so many Pikes, and the timing was all off and everything like that. And then we would zoom out, and there would be like 3 bodies on the ground. So it was like egregious mistakes that just were took you out of it, unfortunately. But
it's interesting that the longer that Star Wars goes, the more forgiving I am of the Ewoks showing up at the Battle of Endor and just destroying stormtroopers, because stuff like this happens and it somehow is even less realistic.
like I said, we will let this stuff will melt away, and we will remember the good stuff. It's happened to me like 50 times, so it'll happen.
Well,
yep.
Boba Fett happened. Boba Fett happened, and the last image we were left with was Cobb Vanth in the bacta tank with the modder. To me, that's not a good enough hook for season 2. But I honestly, as there's a lack of dramatic payoff with his death, but I am glad that he's alive, only because I'm a huge fan of Deadwood. Timothy Olyphant is awesome, and I'm glad that he at least gets the chance to keep on playing the classic sheriff character that he pretty much does perfectly. So,
and they kept talking about his armor. Shouldn't have left him without his armor. And so now he's going to get some built-in armor, and I hope that he's the antagonist next season. I hope he's a bad guy.
I feel like he'll be the good guy, though. I would love to see.
I know, probably, but like, I think it'd be really interesting if he was.
Yeah, him tipping over that spice is like, and letting blow in the wind. This guy's incorruptible. He's your guy you're to root for. But it would be really cool if he was. I agree.
Really hope he gets like, all the other people that have been modded, like get like the red and the green and the blue and the yellow bikes. Now, since he's going to be like the ultimate one, I would imagine he's like a rainbow bike. He has like all the colors together. I think.
Ben, are you hooked now?
Oh man, this is going to be the greatest spin-off ever. Cobb Vanth and his amazing Technicolor Dream Bike.
I like Dream Bike.
It's a curious way to leave off on the show for sure, but I don't know. I'm just give me more Timothy Olyphant. I love Deadwood. I love Justified. So I enjoyed him very much in The Mandalorian.
Crazies. He was great in The Crazies.
And
it just occurred to me that Vance didn't actually factor into the Boba Fett story at all.
No,
he's a Mandalorian character, so like, why was he there with Boba's bacta tank?
That's not a good point.
Freetown like people,
yeah, you know them.
Yep. To Kyle's point, he has played a villain in a forgettable Die Hard movie. So yeah.
Also New Jersey. See?
It's time to start wrapping things up here, I think. So let's get some final thoughts here. Zach, what are your final thoughts on the Book of Boba Fett?
When we get to Boba Fett in terms of the overall timeline, when I or friends or my wife and I rewatch like all Star Wars, we're always in the process of like rewatching something just as like comfort food, right? Like there will be moments of Book of Boba Fett that we will certainly watch. Like I think, talking about what Mando season 3 is going to be like, there are moments in Book of Boba Fett that are as good as some of the best moments in Mando. But there are also moments in Boba Fett that are some of the worst moments in Star Wars. And I mean, I have strong opinions about Star Wars because I have strong opinions about everything. And I think there's a lot to really enjoy about Boba Fett. I think we are more opinionated, obviously, because we're all just kind of digesting it. We digest it over the course of 7 weeks. Whereas I think like if we were to watch it in a few years and watch all 7 episodes in a weekend, would we feel as strongly negatively? I don't necessarily think so. I do think that some of the problems are going to still be as glaring. But I think overall, like, especially in those last 3 episodes, like there are clearly moments that like the people who are running this show knew that fans of Star Wars and knew that people have never seen Star Wars before might find enjoyment in. And I think that's what's cool. Like there are some fun moments in the Book of Boba Fett overall. Is it my favorite Star Wars thing in the world? Absolutely not. Are there things I'm going to forget about it? Totally. Are there some things that I'll never forget about it that I wish I could? Also, absolutely. Overall, I thought it was okay.
Miles, your final thoughts.
Oh, I definitely agree with. There were many things that I enjoyed out of an imperfect story, and I do think that I will remember those things and I will enjoy them going forward. There were a lot of things. There were a lot of shout outs to the prequels, and I can remember when the prequels were truly hated. Not in an ironic way. I mean, we have the Naboo ship. We've got the seismic charge that goes into the Sarlacc pit, which was super cool in my opinion. And we've got somebody referencing you're sweating like a Gumta on Mustafar. So we get some prequel stuff. But in the end, Grogu and the Mandalorian have announced themselves as the heartbeat of, I think the legacy of Boba Fett will be that they appeared and that they are going to be the main thrust of Star Wars going into this decade as they try to pull off the MCU type of thing. And I can tell you from my coworkers, from my wife, who they don't care about Star Wars, but they know this guy. They know Baby Yoda. And it is going to be something that carries forward. There was a lot of cool stuff with the Darksaber that we didn't talk about. The Darksaber fighting against Din and how it kind of has a mind of its own. So there was cool stuff, and we have set up something cool for Grogu and Mandalorian, with them both rejecting each other's respective creeds and the inherent conflict of their creeds, solidarity and loyalty versus the removal of attachment. But why am I talking about that in a book of Boba Fett? So all fair criticisms amongst the thing. But in the end, I also thought it was okay.
Kyle, your final thoughts.
They once again squandered such an amazing opportunity. I like to assume positive intent. I like to assume that creatives learn from their mistakes, but it is clear that Disney has not learned anything from the failures in the sequel trilogy. They also failed with Resistance too, in a way that sort of show that nobody remembers. It's clear that the best showrunners, Favreau and Filoni, are clearly putting their hearts into other projects at the moment, and Fett suffered deeply for it. I think it was especially disappointing just coming hot off the heels of such an amazing show in The Mandalorian. Like that was some of the best Star Wars that exists. And so we assumed, since that came after the sequels, that maybe they had learned from their mistakes. But while I agree that there's room for like 7 out of 10, this was probably closer to a 4 overall. Taking the Mando stuff out and just looking at Boba Fett, there's nothing really here to remember. And it makes me dread some of the future projects. I don't have the faith that I had before in this creative team coming out of the sequels and creating The Mandalorian. You know, it's just a ding on their reputation. There's going to be more Star Wars. There's going to be great Star Wars. This is just like it takes them off the pedestal of perfection. Like they are imperfect. They can make mistakes, and they make a lot of them.
Yeah, like I said earlier, for years, all we had was the original trilogy, and, a few minor criticisms aside, it's the trilogy that nerds held on high as the perfect trilogy. And then we got more. And as we get more, we realize that not every story is going to be perfect. We are going to have misses. And strangely enough, here we are 20, coming up on 23 years after The Phantom Menace originally debuted. And the vitriol that was directed towards the prequel trilogy has died down so much. And the generation that was, 5 years old going into those films, that's their Star Wars. The generation that was 5 years old going into The Force Awakens, that's going to be their Star Wars. And, even though that's not our Star Wars, Mandalorian, for the time being, is going to be our Star Wars, the one that moves the story forward for us in the way that we want. There's something out there for everyone with Star Wars. So again, if you're watching this and you completely disagree with our opinions, or you agree, you are absolutely allowed to love Boba Fett. It's totally okay. You're allowed to, express some of those opinions that we do and say that a lot of this just did not work for me. I'm very hopeful that Obi-Wan is going to be. Obi-Wan's got completely different showrunners, so it's going to feel very different from what we've gotten with Mando and Boba Fett. That could be good, that could be bad, but we're going to get more Mando, and I hope that the quality of that show is more in tune with what we've gotten so far with those first 2 seasons. Maybe someday I'll feel like we can bring back Boba Fett. They were able to in the Clone Wars and Rebels redeem Darth Maul, of all characters, a character who we thought there's no way they can make that character cool again because he's dead. And what they do, like Darth Maul, Darth Maul was the prequel's Boba Fett, a character who is barely there, has almost no dialogue, but is just so cool in his design and is so cool in his ability to fend off 2 Jedi at once. The first character to ever use a double-bladed lightsaber. Darth Maul was the epitome of cool, the way Boba Fett was back in the day. Hopefully one day someone is going to give Boba Fett that redemption that Maul got. So fingers crossed. Star Wars is not going to end. It's going to extend well beyond our lifetimes, assuming that this planet is still in existence.
Rip.
Yeah. So we're just going to have to accept the fact that there's going to be some bad Star Wars out there, and maybe like the prequels, one day we're going to look back on this and say it's just part of Star Wars. But for now, it's time for trivia. And I genuinely am certain you are all going to get this because, like, Zach, you missed it. I forgot to come up with a good trivia question. So I literally wrote one up right as we were starting this episode. So it, of course, ties in to what we've been talking about. So what class of starship is Boba Fett's famous Slave One? A, Executor. B, Fire Spray. C, Destroyer. D, Gunner. I have a feeling everyone knows this.
Do we just go one?
Miles, I'm going to go to you first.
Fire Spray.
One at a time. Kyle?
Yeah, that's a deep cut. I'm also going to go Fire Spray.
Zach?
Executor is a type of Star Destroyer. Fire Spray is what Disney came up with so that they wouldn't refer to it as a Slave One anymore. It's Fire Spray.
Well, everyone benefits from my laziness this week. Yes, the answer is Fire Spray. So congratulations to everyone. You all get a point this week. So that is the Sunday Matinee. This week we talked about the Book of Boba Fett. Next week, we're going to talk about another show that recently debuted and, in my opinion, has had a much more interesting run, and that is HBO's Peacemaker. So Stay tuned to see if the crazy adventures of John Cena hold up. So that's it for episode 36. I am Ben Stahl. Thank you to Kyle, Miles, and Zach for joining me on this very interesting chat about the Book of Boba Fett. Thank you all for watching. We're on Facebook, Twitter. Like and subscribe here on the YouTube. And go out there, watch some movies, watch some TV. Think about it. Don't just, the reason we're here is because we don't just watch this stuff to laze about all day. We watch it because we have a vested interest in it and because every now and then something interesting comes out of it. So enjoy your movies. Have a good day.